The sun had barely risen, yet the streets of Fort Clay were already restless with whispers. Emily Carter stood in the center of them, her wrists trembling inside the lace gloves her late mother had sewn. They were the only piece of beauty she owned aside from her own heart, though she wasn't sure that still counted. Today, that heart was being traded away. Men lined the dusty street, rifles slung over shoulders, eyes fixed on her with a mix of pity and intrigue. She heard their murmurs, some soft, some cruel. A bride for a corpse. Better him than the war he'd bring. Poor girl, wouldn't wish that fate on nobody. Emily swallowed hard and kept her head high. Her father used to say courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was walking forward while your knees shook. If he could see her now, he'd know she was the bravest she'd ever been. She had no choice, not really. The town sheriff, Marshal Abrams, a man whose uniform looked too tight for his pride, had made sure of that. Fort Clay's peace was hanging by a single thread, and somehow that thread was Emily. Move along, Abrams ordered, his voice booming like gunfire. We've got a union to bind. Union. The word tasted bitter. Marriage, yes, but not to a man who could smile at her, speak vows, or even stand beside her. Her husband to be lay unconscious inside the surgeon's tent. Emily's boots scraped over the dirt road as she walked, escorted by 2 soldiers. The canvas tent ahead flapped gently in the wind, its edges stained with dried blood. She paused, feeling the world push against her chest. Inside that tent, a stranger waited. A man the settlers feared. An Apache warrior. His name was Coda. Emily didn't know much about him, only what the gossip carried, that he had been found in the valley after a battle gone wrong, that he'd fought for his people with courage and rage, and that the bullet still inside him was dragging him toward death. He was a problem, and she was the solution. Go on. One soldier nudged her forward, not unkindly, but without care either. She stepped inside. The smell hit her first iron and sweat, the scent of a fight still clinging to the air, light filtered through the canvas walls, washing the tent in a pale gold that didn't quite reach the cot in the corner. He lay there, still as night. Emily's breath caught. Coda was young, no more than a few years older than she was, but his face was carved with a hardness that life in the open land gave a man. High cheekbones, a strong jaw shadowed by days of unshaved stubble, long black hair draped like spilled ink over the pillow. He looked like a warrior even now, trapped in quiet. And she? She was the girl about to become his wife. Pretty sight, ain't he? Marshal Abrams stepped in behind her, voice dripping with mock gentleness. The tribe sent word. Their chief's son goes home dead, there'll be hell to pay. But if he dies a married man? He paused, letting the meaning hang like a noose. Then we got ourselves a bridge to peace. Emily closed her eyes. She had heard all of this already. 12 times. Why me? Her voice came small, a thread unraveling. Abrams shrugged. You're decent, quiet, no family left to lose. And his eyes scanned her with a calculating coldness. You owe this town for letting you stay after your father passed. Her chest tightened. So that was it. Gratitude weaponized. You won't even know, Abrams continued briskly. All you gotta do is say I do. Papers are ready. Doctor witnesses. Soldier witnesses. Easy. Easy. As if giving away the rest of her life was as simple as signing her name. Emily looked at the unmoving man on the cot. A stranger. A warrior. Someone who'd never asked for her any more than she had asked for him. She stepped closer, placing her hand over his warm still, despite everything. She wondered if he would hold her hand one day, or if he would hate her for being the symbol of his captivity. Her voice quivered, but it didn't break. All right, she whispered, for peace. The marshal nodded, satisfied. And so, beneath a canvas ceiling instead of a church steeple, Emily Carter became Emily, something else. Emily Coda? Emily, wife of a silent warrior? No one told her the name. No one told her what came next, but when the papers were signed and everyone filed out, leaving her alone beside him, she felt the weight of the world settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just a bride without a wedding night. She was a woman married to a heartbeat that might stop at any moment. Emily sat beside her husband, fingers still resting on his, and made a silent promise to him, to herself. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered, whether he heard her or not, and neither am I. The nights were the hardest dot when the sun dipped behind the distant red cliffs and the soldiers' boots stopped marching outside. Silence crept into the tent like a living thing. Emily would sit beside Coda, the lantern's flickering light painting shadows across his face, and she would wonder if he was still fighting some unseen battle inside himself. He hadn't woken. Not even once. The army doctor came by each morning, checking the wound in Coda's side. "He's alive because he's stubborn," he'd mutter, tightening bandages rougher than necessary. "But don't expect miracles, Mrs. Carter." Mrs. Carter. Emily still wasn't used to the title, especially when it came with a husband who didn't breathe her name or look into her eyes. She felt like a child trying on a dress too big, drowning in its fabric, yet every day she tried to fill the role fate had handed her. She cleaned his wound carefully, using boiled water and crushed herbs she'd begged off a passing trader. She brushed the knots from his long hair, combing gently so he wouldn't hurt even in sleep. She spoke to him, because the silence was too heavy otherwise. "Hope is all I have," she would whisper, but she never admitted that hope was slipping, like water through her fingers. One evening, rain hammered the canvas roof above them like angry fists. Thunder rolled across the plains, long and deep. Emily jolted when the lightning flashed. Storms always reminded her of the night her father died, horses panicking, roof leaking, no one around to help. She turned toward Coda. His brow had tightened, his fingers twitching against the sheet. Was he dreaming? Fighting? Dying? Emily grabbed his hand, squeezing it with all the strength she had. "I'm here," she murmured. "Please, stay with me." The storm howled in reply. She leaned near him, studying every detail of his face. Proud, strong, a man who had lived a life so different from hers, a life of wilderness, freedom, purpose. And now he was caged in a tent, held together by stitches and prayer. A tear escaped her, falling onto his cheek. "I wish you could tell me who you are," she said. "Tell me what you loved. Tell me if you're angry to find me here, calling myself your wife." The fire snapped. She smiled sadly. "I suppose. You wouldn't believe it, but I've never even held hands with a man before you." She paused, cheeks burning even though no one could see her embarrassment. "Funny, isn't it? My first kiss was signing a marriage paper and praying you'd survive the night." She pulled her chair closer and rested her head near his shoulder. Her voice softened to a trembling whisper. "I'm scared," she confessed, "of losing you. Of what happens if I don't. Of being forgotten again." Forgotten, just like her father, buried outside town with no one left to speak his name but her. The tent flap rustled. Emily straightened as Marshal Abrams stepped in, boots dripping from the rain. "How's our peace treaty doing?" he asked with no concern whatsoever. Emily's spine stiffened. "He has a name," Abrams chuckled. "Sure he does. Now that he's your husband, you go ahead and call him whatever makes you feel better." Emily clutched the blanket over Coda protectively. "What do you want?" "His tribe sent another warning," Abrams said. "If he dies, they come down on us. Hard." His stare pinned her in place like a rattlesnake sighting its prey. "So keep him breathing." "I am," she snapped. He smirked. "Good, because you made a vow and vows matter out here." When he left, the tent felt colder. Emily looked down at Coda again, anger giving her a rare, bold fire. "I don't care what he says," she murmured. "You're not a tool. You're not a treaty. You're a man. My husband." The word finally sounded real in her mouth. She slid her hand back into his, her thumb brushing his knuckles. "Maybe you can't hear me," she said. "But if there's even the smallest chance you can, I want you to know something." Her breath wavered. "I won't give up on you." The storm outside raged on, but inside the tent, a different kind of storm was quietly building, a storm made of hope, courage, and a strange new bond between a silent warrior and a wife who refused to leave his side. Emily settled in. For another sleepless night, unaware that deep beneath his stillness, Coda's heart had begun to beat just a little stronger because of her. Days had passed since Emily Carter first tended to Coda, and with each passing sunrise, her worry grew sharper than the knives the settlers carried for protection. The quiet in the tent was no longer just a weight on her chest, it had become a warning. She could feel it in her bones. The longer Coda remained unconscious, the closer the town edged toward disaster. Rumors arrived on the wind from the scouts returning from the hills. Apache warriors had been spotted moving along the ridge, their horses' hooves stirring clouds of dust that glimmered red in the sun. Some said they carried torches, ready to set fire to farms and cabins in retaliation for the injury of their chief's son. Others whispered that Coda's death or survival would decide the peace of the entire frontier. Emily listened with bated breath, clutching the edge of the tent flap. Her hands were already raw from cleaning and dressing Coda's wounds, but she didn't dare rest. "Dr. Whitman," she said, voice trembling. "If he dies, if Coda dies, will there be war?" The older man looked at her, his weathered face heavy with exhaustion. He had patched countless men, seen countless battles, and yet something in Emily's eyes seemed to break through the wall of cynicism he had built over decades. "Miss Carter," he began, lowering his voice. "He's stubborn. He's strong. But the wound is deep, I won't lie. If he doesn't pull through, the Apache will come. And they won't wait to ask questions. They'll come straight for the fort." Emily's heart seized. She glanced at Coda, his dark hair tangled across the pillow, chest rising slowly with each breath. His face was pale, his lips cracked, yet there was a faint glimmer of life in his cheek, a stubborn pulse. She had to keep him alive, not just for her own sake, but for the sake of everyone in Fort Clay. She sank beside him, resting her forehead near his shoulder. "You have to live," she whispered. "If you don't, I don't know what will happen to this town. To me, to us." Her words were more than a plea. They were a prayer offered into the silent night, carried by the howling wind across the plains. Outside, the town prepared for the worst. Barricades were set along the main street. Men armed with rifles and shotguns paced nervously, their eyes darting toward the horizon. The tension was a living thing so thick Emily could almost taste it. Inside the tent, the fear was just as strong, but Emily had no choice but to fight it. She washed his wounds again, applied salves, then murmured stories of her childhood on the ranch, of the open skies, of summer nights when the stars felt close enough to touch. Her voice wavered, yet she persisted, hoping that some part of Coda could hear her through the haze of unconsciousness. She imagined what he must be feeling if he could hear her anger, confusion, disbelief. He was a warrior, not a man who took orders, yet here he was, tied to a town that feared him, to a girl who was expected to become his wife without ever knowing him. Emily's chest ached with sympathy and dread. "I can't lose you," she whispered. "I won't let them take you, and I won't let you slip away on me. You'll fight, Coda. You'll wake up. And when you do," her lips trembled, "I'll be here." Thunder rolled across the distant hills as if echoing her words, reminding her that the frontier was a place where promises were often tested by fire and blood. She clutched his hand again, this time with more force, as if sheer will could anchor him to life. The doctor shook his head at her. He's barely hanging on. If you want him to survive, you need to keep him awake, talk to him, sing to him. Do whatever it takes to pull him back. Emily nodded, determination hardening in her chest like iron. Then that's what I'll do. Outside the tent, the first signs of the Apache scouts appeared on the ridge. Inside, Emily leaned closer to Coda, her voice soft but unwavering. The storm outside raged in the distance, but the storm inside the tent, the storm of fear, hope, and a desperate love, was louder. She didn't yet know if her words could reach him. But she would try. She would keep trying. Because if she failed, the war would come, and the life of the man beside her, and the fragile peace of the frontier would be lost forever. The storm outside had grown wild, lashing the canvas of the tent with a fury Emily had never known. Rain splattered against the edges, hammering like the drumbeats of a battle. And thunder rolled across the plains in a rhythm that echoed her own frantic heartbeat. Emily sat on the cot beside Coda, her hands pressed against the blankets covering his chest, her fingers tracing the faint rise and fall of his breathing. It was steady, but barely. Every exhale seemed like a battle he had yet to win. Every shallow inhale tore at her heart, reminding her that time was slipping away. She had tended to him for days, washing his wounds, dressing the gashes, combing the knots from his long hair, whispering stories and prayers. Nothing had worked. He remained silent, motionless, like a warrior frozen in the aftermath of some terrible ambush. And now, as the storm raged around them, Emily's courage began to crumble. I can't lose you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not now. Not when you've already survived so much." Tears blurred her vision, falling freely onto the blankets as if they could somehow seep into him and breathe life back into his wounded body. Her chest ached with the weight of helplessness, a crushing burden that no hand or heart in Fort Clay could lift. Emily leaned closer, her forehead resting lightly against Coda's shoulder. "I don't know how to save you," she admitted. "I don't know if anyone can. But I swear to God, I will not let you die, not while I'm here." Her voice broke, and she pulled back slightly, staring down at his unmoving form. A sob escaped her lips, loud and unrestrained, echoing through the small tent. The fear, the desperation, the longing, all of it spilled from her like the rain outside. I love you," she whispered, though the words felt foreign and impossible on her tongue. She hadn't known him. She barely knew him at all. Yet in these endless nights of watching over him, of speaking to a man who could not respond, she had found a strange, impossible affection blossoming in the quiet corners of her heart. And then, in a moment of pure, unfiltered desperation, Emily did the one thing her heart told her might reach him. She leaned down and pressed her lips to his dot. It was not a kiss of passion or romance. It was a kiss of pleading, of hope, of raw human need. A kiss that said everything she could not put into words. Please wake. Please survive. Please let me stay with you. For a long, suspended moment, nothing happened. The storm outside roared louder, the wind whistled through the flaps of the tent, and Emily's own heart seemed to stop. And then, slight at first, Coda's fingers twitched. Emily froze, holding her breath, afraid that she had imagined it. But his chest, previously shallow, rose a fraction higher. His lips moved slightly, parting as if tasting the air, and a low groan rumbled from deep in his throat. Emily's tears turned to disbelief and relief. She pressed her hand harder against his, feeling warmth where there had been none. "Coda," she whispered. His dark eyes fluttered open, slow at first, revealing a gaze that was both bewildered and alive. He blinked several times, as though testing the world, and then slowly focused on her. She's here," he muttered, his voice hoarse but unmistakably present. Emily's chest ached with emotion, and she clutched his hand as tears streamed down her face. Yes, I'm here. You're alive. You made it. A faint, lopsided smile appeared on Coda's lips, the first real sign of life and warmth. Wife. He whispered again, as if tasting the word, tasting her name. Emily laughed and cried at the same time, leaning close to press her forehead against his once more. The storm outside raged on, but inside the small tent, a miracle had occurred. She had given him life not through medicine, not through magic, but through the fierce, desperate love of a woman who refused to stand by while the man she had promised herself to slip away. And for the first time, Emily felt the impossible, hope blooming amidst fear. A fragile, shining hope that the silent warrior beside her could not only survive, but perhaps one day love her in return. The tent felt impossibly still after the storm had passed. Outside, the first hints of dawn painted the horizon with pale orange and gold, spilling light across the plains. But inside, time seemed frozen, held hostage by the quiet miracle that had just occurred. Coda's dark eyes had opened fully, no longer clouded by unconsciousness. Emily watched him breathe, every movement deliberate, every shudder of muscle a reminder that he had survived. He was alive, truly alive. And for the first time, he was aware of her presence beside him. He tried to speak, hoarse and uncertain. Wife! The word came out in a whisper, raw and trembling, like a fragile bird taking its first flight. Emily's heart leapt. Yes, she whispered back, tears slipping down her cheeks. I'm here. You're safe now. You made it. Coda's gaze lingered on her face, dark eyes studying every line and curve, every tear-stained cheek. It was as if he were learning the world again through her presence, measuring the life he had almost lost. Slowly, he lifted a trembling hand and brushed it over hers. The warmth of his touch sent shivers through her spine. Emily smiled, a laugh catching in her throat. You scared me, she admitted. I thought I was going to lose you. Coda's lips twitched in something resembling a smile. You saved me, he rasped, voice hoarse from weeks of silence. Why? Her own voice broke. Because I couldn't let you die. I don't know you, not fully, but I care. He studied her for a long moment, the intensity of his gaze piercing through the years of fear and distance that had kept them apart. Care, he repeated, testing the word, tasting it. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, Stay with me. Emily's heart soared. That simple command carried the weight of trust, of vulnerability, of connection. She nodded, gripping his hand tightly. I won't leave. For the first time, Coda moved with purpose, lifting himself slightly onto the cot. Emily helped him adjust, careful not to strain his wounded side. Each motion was deliberate, cautious. But alive? Alive. The word repeated in her mind like a prayer answered, and then came the moment that made her chest ache with relief and joy. Coda reached for her face, cupping her cheek gently. His fingers were rough, calloused, and yet careful, as if the world had taught him how to fight but not how to touch. Your kiss, he murmured, it brought me back. Emily pressed her forehead against his, tears flowing freely now. I didn't know, I just hoped. The miracle wasn't just that he had survived. It was that they had found each other in the process. A bond forged in desperation, in fear, in the quiet courage of two people who had no choice but to cling to life and to each other. Outside the tent, the sun climbed higher, spilling light across the frontier. Emily and Coda remained locked in that quiet moment, their hands intertwined, their breaths synchronized. He blinked against the light, adjusting to the world he had nearly left behind, while she marveled at the warrior before her, the man who had fought death and now perhaps could begin to fight for Hurt as well. Koda's voice grew firmer, stronger. Emily, wife, you saved me. I am yours. Her chest tightened. She had feared he might never speak, never acknowledge her courage, never see her heart. And yet, here he was alive, aware, and choosing her. I am yours too, she whispered, resting her head against his shoulder. Forever, if you'll have me. A new day had begun on the wild plains, one where hope had replaced fear and love had begun its careful, deliberate work. The miracle was not just survival, it was the awakening of connection, of trust, and of the promise that perhaps together they could face whatever the frontier had in store. Koda's fingers tightened around hers, and Emily smiled through tears. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, with the sun rising over the plains, they had both been reborn through desperation, through courage, and through a single, life-saving kiss. By the next morning, the air in Fort Clay had changed. The storm had passed, but the tension remained, heavier now that Koda was awake. Emily had barely slept, her mind spinning with the knowledge that the Apache warriors could appear at any moment. And they did. From the ridge above the town, the glint of sunlight on spear tips and polished weapons announced their arrival. Horses pawed the dirt impatiently, and the rhythmic clatter of hooves echoed across the plains. Scouts from the town rushed to the fort, but it was clear the Apache were not coming for a simple warning. They were coming for their chief's son. Emily gripped Koda's hand as he sat upright, his dark eyes scanning the horizon. The movement was slow, deliberate, cautious. The wariness of a lifetime etched into his muscles. He had survived bullets, blood, and near death. Yet the sight of his people drew out attention that rivaled any battle he had fought. They're here. Emily whispered. Koda nodded, his jaw tightening. They think I am taken, captured, weak. I will not let them think so. His voice was quiet, but every word carried authority, a command forged by the land and his tribe. Emily's chest tightened. She knew what he meant. If they demanded he leave with them, or worse, punished her for being there would be bloodshed. And she could not bear to lose the man she had just helped bring back to life. Outside the tent, a messenger arrived, one of Koda's own warriors, mounted and draped in ceremonial feathers. The rider dismounted, boots crunching in the dirt, and addressed Koda in a language Emily did not understand. The words were harsh, clipped, demanding. Koda's eyes narrowed. I am here, he said in return, voice steady. Then, turning to Emily, he said softly, stay close. They may question everything. Emily nodded, feeling both fear and resolve. She had promised him she would not leave, and she would keep that promise, no matter the danger. The leader of the Apache warriors stepped forward, tall and imposing, eyes dark with suspicion. He looked at Emily as if assessing her worth, then to Koda, as if seeking confirmation. You are alive, the chief said finally, his voice deep, carrying authority that could bend men to his will. But why is this woman here? Who is she? Koda straightened, the strength of his presence filling the small space between them. She is my wife, he said, every word deliberate. She stayed with me. She saved my life. The chief's eyes flicked to Emily. She swallowed, stepping forward. Her hands were clammy, her heart pounding, but her voice was clear. I did not choose him at first, she admitted. But I stayed. I could not let him die. I chose to be here to protect him and to honor the man he is. I do not seek war. I seek only peace. A tense silence followed. The Apache warriors shifted uneasily, unsure of this small white woman who spoke with such courage. Koda's father, the chief, studied her carefully. Then, slowly, he nodded. You have courage, he said, and loyalty. These are rare gifts. Emily's chest lifted with relief. For the first time, she felt accepted, not as a hostage or pawn, but as someone who had earned her place. Coda reached for her hand again, squeezing it gently. His voice was low but resolute. "You are my world. No one may harm you. Not my tribe, not the town, not anyone." Emily smiled through tears. The danger had not passed entirely, but the bond between them had grown stronger in the face of it. She realized now that love was not just in the gentle moments, it was forged in fire, in courage, in standing beside someone when the world demanded their life, outside. The Apache warriors began to withdraw, satisfied that their chief's son was alive and well, and that the woman beside him was no ordinary girl. Emily and Coda remained, hands entwined, standing between two worlds, one of settlers and one of warriors, each demanding loyalty, respect, and courage. And in that moment, Emily understood something profound. She was no longer just a bride. She was a partner, a protector, and a force that had awakened the warrior before her and perhaps, one day, awakened a love that could survive anything the frontier threw their way. The tension that had gripped Fort Clay for days began to shift, slowly like the sun climbing over the horizon. Emily Carter stood beside Coda, hands intertwined, her heart still hammering from the confrontation with his tribe. But now she felt something she hadn't before: power. Not the power of a gun or a fist, but the power of courage, conviction, and love. The Apache warriors had returned to their ridge after confirming that their chief's son was alive and well. Yet there remained uncertainty, a fragile thread of peace that could snap at any wrong word or movement. Emily knew that while Coda had survived the bullets and wounds of battle, it would take her voice, her bravery, to ensure this war did not flare again. She turned to Coda, whose dark eyes were fixed on the horizon, muscles tense but slowly relaxing as he trusted her judgment. "I can't let this end badly," she said softly. "Not after everything." He nodded, his fingers brushing hers. "Then speak," he urged. "Speak with truth. Speak with courage." Emily drew a deep breath. Stepping forward, she faced the soldiers and townsfolk gathered in the dusty square, then lifted her gaze to the ridge where the Apaches still lingered, watching and waiting. Her voice rang out, clear and unwavering, carrying across the wind. "I am Emily Carter," she began, "wife to Coda, warrior of the Apache. I did not choose him at first, but I chose to stay. I stayed because he is alive, because he is a man worthy of life, and because I believe in peace between our people. I will not let fear or hatred decide our fates. I ask for understanding, for trust, for the chance to live together in peace." The air seemed to hold its breath. The soldiers exchanged glances, unsure of how the small, brave woman standing before them could hold the weight of two worlds. The Apache chief's eyes, dark and penetrating, studied her, measuring her heart as one might measure the strength of a bowstring. Then, after a long silence, the chief spoke. His voice was low, deliberate, carrying the weight of authority. "You speak with courage. You speak with loyalty. You have not only saved my son's life, but you have honored him. You are accepted." Emily's chest swelled with relief. Tears threatened, but she held them back, knowing that every eye was upon her. Coda's hand squeezed hers gently, grounding her as she turned to face him fully. "You did this," he said softly, voice thick with admiration. "You stood for both of us. You are extraordinary." She shook her head, laughing through her tears. "No," she said. "I only did what I had to. I couldn't let you die. I couldn't let our people fight over what should never have happened." Coda's dark eyes softened, the fire of a warrior now tempered with tenderness. "And yet, you did it. You chose us. You chose me. You chose love. As the townsfolk watched, the Apache warriors began to mount their horses, their posture less tense, their gaze warmer. The chief nodded once, a quiet blessing. Emily and Coda had not only survived the storm, they had commanded respect, forged peace, and proven that courage and heart could bridge even the widest divides. Emily turned back to Coda, her own tears spilling freely now. "We've done it," she whispered. "We've survived. And now we can live. Truly live." Coda cupped her face in his hands, brushing the wet strands of hair from her forehead. "You have saved my life, my heart, and my world. I will spend every day making sure you know your courage was not in vain." The two stood together, hand in hand, as the morning sun cast a golden glow across the plains. For the first time, Emily felt the weight of fear lift, replaced by hope, love, and the unspoken promise of forever. In that moment, she understood what the frontier had taught them both. Survival was not enough. Life was not merely about breathing, but about daring to stand for what mattered, even when the world demanded otherwise. And so, side by side, Emily and Coda began the next chapter of their lives, not as a woman forced into a marriage, not as a warrior bound by blood, but as partners, as equals, and as two hearts that had discovered the extraordinary power of love forged in the crucible of the Wild West. The plains were quiet at last. Dawn had given way to a soft afternoon sun, and the winds that once carried tension and fear now whispered gently through the tall grasses. The town of Fort Clay had returned to its ordinary rhythm, the Apache warriors gone back to their lands, and the fragile peace that Emily Carter had helped forge now settled, like a warm blanket over the frontier. Inside the small tent where she had first met her husband awake, Emily adjusted the blankets on the cot, heart pounding with anticipation. The papers had been signed, the conflicts addressed, and for the first time, she felt that her marriage to Coda was no longer a matter of obligation. It was a union born of survival, courage, and an extraordinary bond that had grown stronger with every trial. Coda moved beside her, his tall frame stretching as he leaned close. His dark eyes, usually so guarded, now shone with warmth and tenderness. "Emily," he murmured, voice low, roughened by weeks of silence and pain, "we have survived storms, bullets, and doubt. Now it is time for what we promised ourselves. Time to be truly husband and wife." Emily smiled, her hands trembling as she reached for his. "I've waited for this," she whispered. "Not the papers, not the obligations, but this U.S." He drew her close, fingers tracing her cheek, thumbs brushing away tears she didn't even realize had fallen. "Your courage brought me back," he said. "Your love gave me life. Tonight I will give you mine fully." For the first time, the tent felt less like a hospital and more like home. The weight of fear and obligation lifted, replaced by something delicate and powerful: trust, love, and the promise of shared lives. Emily allowed herself to relax, to lean into the strong arms that had protected her, that had survived for her, and that would now fight alongside her in a different kind of battle, the battle of hearts, of closeness, of love finally allowed to flourish. The evening fell, a golden sunset spilling through the canvas walls. Shadows danced across their faces as Coda gently guided her onto the cot, hands steady and tender. Emily felt the beating of his chest beneath her fingers. The warmth of a life returned. She realized then that the frontier had given her something extraordinary, a man she had not chosen, yet somehow loved beyond measure. A warrior whose survival had become intertwined with her own courage and heart. Their first kiss as true husband and wife was not desperate, but deliberate, long and full, a promise carried in every brush of lips and every soft sigh. Emily felt the strength of Coda's arms around her, the steady rhythm of his heartbeats syncing with her own. It was no longer a kiss of pleading or desperation. It was a kiss of joy, of triumph, of love that had been tested and proven unbreakable. "I never imagined this," Emily whispered, resting her forehead against his. "That fear could turn into this." "Into love?" Coda's voice was low, full of reverence. "You awakened me, Emily, not just from a coma, from a life without hope. You gave me everything. And now, I belong to you as you belong to me." Tears slid down Emily's cheeks, but they were tears of happiness, relief, and the quiet awe of having survived the impossible. "Forever," she breathed. "No matter what comes, forever." Outside the tent, the world carried on as it always did. The plains, the wind, the distant hills, but inside, time had slowed. There was no fear, no threat, no burden of expectation. There was only Coda, only Emily, and the incredible, fragile, triumphant love they had carved from a world that had tried to deny them everything. And when night fully descended, stars spilling like silver dust across the sky, they held each other close. In the soft flicker of the lantern, in the quiet heartbeat shared between them, Emily and Coda finally knew peace. A marriage born in fear, forged in desperation, and sealed with courage and love had reached its true beginning. And as they fell asleep in each other's arms, the frontier whispered a gentle truth. Love, once awakened, can endure anything, even the wild, untamed heart of the West.